Good morning, everybody. Parashat Bo, very exciting parasha. It contains the continuation of the plagues. I'd like to speak a little bit first about the concept of what's taking place in this week's parasha. I think it expands way more to just the exodus of Egypt. I think it speaks to all personal exoduses and all personal redemptions. I'll clarify as we get started. The parasha starts with Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem speaks to Moshe and he says, Bo el Paro. And these words, Bo el Paro, the word Bo, you might think means to come, but it's a certain type of coming. It's Bo, meaning to return, to come back to a place where you once were, to come back to a previous space that we've occupied. And what do I mean by that? When Moshe is going to come to Paro, rather than just do this outward movement, outward from the self, he's actually returning to a place and a part of his own self. And in doing so, in approaching Paro in this way, he will be returning in a way that will bring not just an exodus and a salvation in Egypt, but for us, all future redemptions will start with this concept of Bo. So what does Bo mean? What does it mean besides to return to an earlier place? The message that Moshe is going to give Paro, you could see it most clearly in verse 9, chapter 10, book of Shemot, Parashat Bo, is Moshe tells Paro, we are going to go bin arenu ubeziknenu. Verse 9, what was the original plan? The original plan was for them to go to worship God in the desert for 3 days. And Paro had said no because he feared that they would go and never come back. And there were a series of negotiations where Paro said, you can go, but you must leave your wives, your children as collateral, your animals, your livestock as collateral. And now what's taking place is Moshe is saying, we can't do that. A redemption is full. The Jewish version, the Jewish ideal of a redemption is no man gets left behind. And when he uses these terms, I think it's just very beautiful how the text says, Bina'arenu ubeziknenu. We're going to take our young and we're going to take our old. I think he's speaking to the demographics of the youth and the elderly, but I think Moshe is saying something even more profound for all of us. And that is, if we want to move forward, if we want to reach the next frontier, if we want to reach the promised land, then we ourselves have to embody our own youth, our own ne'arim. We have to channel our own youthfulness and our own ziknenu, either our future selves or our present selves. But we must go back to a place first. First, we go to the ne'arim. You'd think, just out of respect, and I'd like to dedicate this class to my mom. This week was her 21st birthday. If I said her real age, I'd be in big trouble. And she is the most young at heart person that I know. In her, a picture popped up for some reason. I don't know how the iPhone works, but sometimes a picture pops up out of nowhere from a special date or whatever, and I don't even know how to regain it. But a picture came up. She was in Mexico. My sister Rochelle took her to her old elementary school, Benito Juarez, her first grade classroom. And she took a picture of my mother in her 80s sitting in her first grade classroom chair. That picture tells 1,000 words and is the story of Parashat Bo. It's the story of our Exodus because it speaks to the young at heart. It speaks to being able to, in our elder years, connect to our youth. And at the same time, in our youth, in order for us to reach a promised land in our youth, we have to project who we want to be, what we want to become, who we're going to be in our old age. What are we going to look like? We have to start to design that in our youth in order to get to that place. But when we get to that place, we can't forget to bring our young selves with us. And this is what Moshe is saying. Paro, you think this is just a journey, an expedition? You think this is just a day trip or a couple of days trip that we want to take? This is a totally different experience. This is an experience that's going to take us. And I had mentioned my mom because she always teaches us when you speak, the elders come first, you name them first, and then the children. The elders are the ones that get the respect. But the Torah here is reversing the order and saying we're going to take our children and our elders because Bnei Yisrael, in their nationhood, at this point, they are still nascent. They are still ne'arim. They are still babies. They haven't yet developed into who they're going to become. But at the same time, and this is why it's so beautiful, they're also the elders, because the babies of this generation were Yosef, were Yaakov and Yitzchak and Abraham. So wherever you are on the timeline, you're the youth and you're the elder. And the only way that we'll be able to get to the promised land is to connect to our earliest selves, even as a nation. We have to go back to that place. What place am I talking about? The ideologic place, the place where God said, I am going to make you a nation of kings. I am going to make you like the stars in the sky and the sand in the earth. That's the place that I want you to be in. That's the space in your minds that you need to, we today need to be in that space if we want to reach our own promised lands. So these words, ne'arenu, if you think about what would constitute, how would we describe a na'ar in today's, what would you ascribe, what tendencies, what attributes would you give to a na'ar, a youth? What are youths? How are they? Give me an idea what they are. Energetic, impulsive, maybe physically strong, idealistic. Exactly. The young kids believe that anything is possible. I'm even going to say they're filled with wonder. They're filled with awe. They're impressionable. I mean, there's so much that you could say about the youth. They're sometimes also impetuous, impatient. They act before they think. There's a whole set of, and by the way, this whole package that is ne'arenu is going to be required to cross the next frontier. But at the same time, what is Moshe saying? We're not just going to take that untempered energy with us. We're also going to take, how would you describe ziknenu, our elderly? What words would you use to describe the revered elders? Yes, somebody said?
Wise.
Wise, beautiful, wisdom for sure, the wisdom of the years, experience, beautiful. Maybe they have more patience. Maybe they do think before they act. But also at the same time, maybe they have a sense of been there, done that, the opposite of the energy. Maybe they're a little bit more tired. Maybe they're a little bit more cautious. Maybe they're jaded. There's a whole slew of understandings that come. Now, of course, I'm not putting either of these in a box because you'll find the elderly, many times, the ones you'll see them, you know them, they have a twinkle in their eye. They have a smirk on their face 24/7. They know something you don't know. And they're laughing at life and they're laughing through life because they're allowing their experiences they're allowing their past selves to join them. They're playful. You ever see those
It's
elderly?
called experience.
It's called experience. Yes, I
That's
know
it,
that
one
has to
word.
be Rosemary. I know that voice anywhere. So I was right, you see. Anyway, so what is Moshe telling us in this introduction? I know he's speaking to Par'o, but it's recorded here. Not everything that gets said gets recorded. So if this is recorded, it's speaking to us. And it's saying, this is not only who is going out, but what happens when the youth, when our youthful selves, nationally and personally, combine with our future selves, our current selves, our more mature selves. Again, wherever you are on that spectrum. If you're a youth, you have to picture what your future is going to look like. And if you're already on the elder side, don't leave your playful self at home. Bring him to the table. Bring him to the party. Why am I saying bring him to the party? Because the Torah is going to say, you know what that's going to produce? Chag la Hashem. Do you know what a chag, what a festival is? As Jews, how do we celebrate? What do we consider a festival? I know we're familiar specifically at the Seder table. We have the young and the old all sitting together. And we don't just have the young and old. I want to make it clear. When I say young and old, it applies to all different types, the enlightened and the not yet enlightened, the strong and the not yet strong, the developed and the not yet developed. I'm speaking to every demographic. By the way, that Moshe is going to speak, Bebanenu, Bibinotenu. There's no discrimination here. Everybody has to come to the party. In order for it to be a chag, not just do all people have to be invited, but all parts of ourselves have to be invited. If we don't use, my daughter-in-law Simone told me this one word, I'm using it or abusing it at this point. It's called integration. And she says we have to integrate our whole selves, every part of ourselves. We can't leave a part of ourselves. We can't leave a feeling that's uncomfortable. We can't, it is part of who we are. So our community, our families, our nation is all one, just like our individual selves have to be integrated. And my favorite example is the Sefer Torah itself. If it's missing a single letter, it's pasul. You can't use it. And if we are missing a single member, and then Moshe is making a strong statement, we cannot discriminate, not factions of our nation and not parts of ourselves. But to be at peace with all of who we are at any and every given time. And since God is past, present, and future together, then we have to find a way to bring our past, present, and future selves. And when we do, that's the definition of a chag. That's the definition of a festival. That's cause for celebration. And that very mindset is what's going to allow us to cross the next threshold. So with that introduction, I'd like to spend some of our time today, because I think it's a very, very beautiful parasha. It has the last 3 plagues are going to take place in this parasha. When we were younger, they said, how do you remember? Because the bet is 2 and the aleph is 1. And that's how you know there's 3 plagues in this parasha. And we also know that that's how we know what bo means, because the bet is going towards the aleph. So we're going backwards, we're returning. And returning, like we said, we're returning to a place when we were filled with awe, when everything was a marvel for us. We have to sometimes, you use the word jaded, and I thought that was a great word, because when we get older, nothing impresses us anymore. And you know what every holiday is? It's a revisiting of the awesome experiences that God has provided for us, that God has blessed us with. And when we go through those experiences in our cyclical calendar time and time again, that reawakens, it regenerates our youthful selves on some level. And that's the Chag. And so since we're talking about Chag, the mothership of all Chagim, or let's say this better, the cyclical calendar, the lunar calendar starts and is introduced to us in this week's Perashah, chapter 12, verse 1, I believe is the whole Torah standing on one foot. I know I say it a lot, but this is for sure one of my favorite areas. We could spend an entire year and not exhaust what's written in chapter 12. So let me give you a little introduction. I gave it a big drum roll. So now I hope I could deliver for you what's being said here. Let's look at the first verse. Wait, I'll give you, okay, we'll zoom out for a second. At this point, God interrupts the plagues to give us a commercial break. What's the commercial break? It's in between the darkness, the 9th plague, and the firstborns being killed, which is the 10th plague. In between, we're going to interrupt our scheduled programming to tell you this story. What is this story? Why is this placed right here? And just to add to the importance of this first verse in chapter 12, Rashi, the commentary, maybe the foremost commentary on Torah, very, very widely studied commentary. He starts the entire Torah, his first commentary, back in the book of Bereshit. What does he say? Why doesn't the Torah start right here on page 348 in chapter 12, verse 1? That's his question. He says that if you view Torah as a book of laws or as a book of history, our national history starts here, and our laws as a nation, our first law that's being given to us as a nation starts here as well. So we really better pay attention and see what's being said here. And in case we maybe weren't on our A game, all you have to do is look at the first verse. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aharon be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. For most readers, this is just a little introduction. This is that little tune that they play before they go into the real music. For us, it's the whole story. Why is it such an important story for us? It starts and ends, that verse starts and ends, it's bookended with the same word. What is that word? Omer, Amar, Lemor, Vayomer, Ma'amarot. I'm taking you, whether you like it or not, it's not me. The Torah is telling us what Rashi was telling us. When commentaries make statements, they expect that we have all the background knowledge and all the nuances. Rashi expects us to come and open this verse and say, oh, God created the world using only the word Vayomer. That's how the world came to be in Bereshit. That's how humanity came into existence with the word Vayomer. And now that same word is going to be used here to bring our nationhood, to birth the nation of Israel. God, of course, the Torah, of course, has to use words of creation in order to bring about a new entity. Just like he created the world, he's creating the nation in these words. Now, these two words, Vayomer, they start and end our story. That's just that early introduction. That's just the music starting us off, getting us prepared for the next verse, which is an entire masterpiece. It is Torah at its best. It is symmetry, it is poetry, it is the whole Torah. If I had to give you the Torah standing on one foot, this would be the pasuk that I would come to. It's one of my, I know, I say they're like my children, so they're all my favorites. I don't know which one to say, but this one is really up there. And you know why it's my favorite? Because it connects to my other favorite, and I'll show you how. So just so you can see it, and again, we're learning it in a codex type book, which is linear, so it's hard for us to get the full vista of how the pasuk is displayed. So I'll just tell you, if you have markers, like I sound like a broken record, but if you had your colored markers, you would be able to see it in a heartbeat. The chiastic structure, the way the pasuk looks at itself in the mirror, is telling us everything we need to know about ourselves, about our nation, about Exodus, and about redemption. The whole story is here, so I'll show it to you. The verse starts with HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim Rishon Hu Lachem Lechodsheh Hashana. And if we put it up on the board, we would see that our first words, Chodesh and Chodesh, right, are on the outer rims of the verse. As we come towards center, we have Lachem and Lachem. And as we come closer towards center, we have Rosh and Rishon. Can you see that? I hope you could see that in your Sefarim. We have Chodesh, Lachem, and Rosh. I'll start even in a simpler way. If you were editing this verse, it's really comprised of two halves. I could use one half or the other. I don't need both halves. I could have HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. This is the head of the months. Finish. I don't need the other half. What's the other half saying? The same exact thing. Rishonu Lachem Lechodsheh Shana. It's the first month of all the months. So both halves are saying the same thing. I don't need both halves. Or do I? The introduction that I gave you said that you need your ne'arim and your zekenim. You need, it's one self, but it could be different times. This is another beautiful thing about Parashat HaChodesh. This is called, by the way, Parashat HaChodesh. We read it before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's read, you know those 4 parashiyot that we read in shul? Parashat Shekalim, Parashat Para, Parashat Zachor. This is one of those. Parashat HaChodesh is introducing the new moon of Nisan. This year we have 2 Adars, so it's going to take us a little longer to get there. But what's being said here twice, possibly, and not just is this verse repeating itself. Almost every verse in this parshiya is going to have a redundancy. I'll show that to you as well. I told you it's writing that is so spectacular that it could only have been written by the divine. A human being can't come up with this type of structure within a structure within a structure. I'll explain that as well. So first, I'd like to say that what's being said here is being said twice, perhaps, because once for Pesach Mitzrayim, once to speak to the Pesach that was in Egypt, and once for Pesach Torot. And everything that you will see moving forward that was instructed for them back then in Egypt is still being asked of us today and for all future generations. So let's look at it together. One more thing I'd like to say is the fact that it's chiastic should not be lost on us. The fact that it's A's on the outsides, B's as we move towards center, C's as we come towards the center. What is it? When does that happen? It happens when a person looks in the mirror. It's a reflective format. What's it asking us to do? The pasuk is doing what it wants us to do. It wants us technically to look in the mirror. And I don't mean a typical mirror like you might have hanging on the wall. Why is it using this exact structure? And you asked me if it's my favorite, and I said yes, because it reminds me, this is the creation of the nation. Well, when the people, when humanity, when Adam was created, Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam betzalmo, betzelem Elohim bara oto. That verse also, I could have used one half or the other half. God created man in his image. In his image, God created man. Do I need those two halves? And not just that, but the baras and the Elohims and the Tsalmos, the components of that verse are the three components that are looking at themselves in the mirror as well. So if this introduction is going to mirror that introduction, it's saying, fasten your seatbelts. There's a creation taking place here. There's a new dynamic. There's a new world order. And in that world order, this is where it gets, I mean, so much, I told you, we spent a whole year. I didn't, one pasuk, but I want to give you more than that. But there's so much here. I'm sure there's an artist somewhere who's taken this and has color coded it and shown, I mean, I've done it on my own computer, and you end up with a literal masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. I'll give you one or two examples just so you could see what I'm talking about. It says, for instance, in the next verse, to speak to Adat B'nai Yisrael and tell them on the 10th day of the month, they should take ish se lebet avot. Each man should take a lamb for the house of his father. And then it says again, se labayit. I don't need the se labayit. You just told me to take a se lebet avot. I want to show it to you just so you're aware. Try this at home because you will be blown away. I'll give you one more verse, the next one. I want to show it to you, and then you could have fun with your markers, splitting up and saying, wait a minute, it's saying it again. Everything that it's saying twice, but you have to look for it. You have to be aware of it. As we have to be aware at all times. What'd you say? There must be a reason. There's clearly a reason. You said Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Torot. That was the reason I gave with you, and I agree. But I believe there's more integrations that are taking place. So I'll just give you the next one so you have a sense. We could talk about this pasuk forever, but verse 4, I'm going to say it in English, otherwise I'm going to spend the whole day on this pasuk. But if the house is, they like to say, is not big enough to eat only one seh, velakach hu ushcheno. So you're going to call on your neighbor's house, have a barbecue and share, because you can't eat all that meat yourself, right? But what does it say? Hu ushcheno, he and his neighbor. And then what does it say? Hakarov el beto. Like, I don't know who my shachen is. You have to tell me. It's like me telling you, invite your neighbor. You know, the guy who lives next door to you. Why do I have to tell you the guy that lives next? The Torah doesn't waste a vowel. Not a letter, not a word, not a vowel. And here they're saying, oh yeah, the guy who lives next door to you is Hakarov el beto. Why do you have to tell me that? Why is everything in duplicity? Why is everything being doubled here? I'm trying to point out, literally standing on one foot, the magnificence that is this parshiah. Now, we didn't even touch upon what is the command, what is being said, what is being asked of Moshe. I just picked apart the literary structure without telling you what God is telling Moshe. You know what God is telling Moshe? I created the world in Bereshit. Rashi told us that also. He was putting us together with this pasuk because he wanted us to know that, yeah, God did create the world in Bereshit. And this, what's taking place here, is now how man is going to move the world forward. This is us continuing God's creation. This is us understanding the purpose of why God created us in the first place. Why did he create us in his mirror image? the verse that speaks about us being created in God's image is in image form. There's so much to appreciate here, just from the structure of it. But now we want to appreciate the next level, which is the content of the words. Oh, I'm muted? No. Which is the content of the words. Let's look at it. What's being said here? You're going to tell me that the verse says that from now on, I'm going to call the month Nisan. Nisan is just the name that was given to us. The Babylonians gave names to each of the months. In the Torah, months are named by their order. The 6th month, the 10th month, the 7th month, right? On the 10th day of the 7th month, that's Yom Kippur, because the 7th month is Tishrei. And you're going to ask me, wait. When did Tishrei become the 7th month? I thought we dipped the apple in the honey because we wanted to have a sweet new year. How could it be the new year if it's the 7th month? You literally took the clock, make believe you took the 12 and the 6, in this case it's the 1 and the 7, and you rotated them. 180. You turned what was on at the head on its feet and what was on the feet to its head. You literally turned the world upside down. Because that's how monumentous what's taking place here is. God is saying, I created the world. I was on the top, Bashamayim. You were on the bottom, on the Aretz. And guess what's happening here? There is a monumental shift. And the shift is that now I am rotating the clock. And I don't want you to feel that you're just on the bottom and I'm on the top. I'm turning it. I'm saying that the world that you're going to create now, starting here, henceforth, is going to be the top. The 7 is going to become the 1. What do I mean by that? What does God mean by that? There's very big things he's saying. He's saying, I created the world. But what you're about to embark on is going to be as great, as important, as magnificent, as regal and royal, as number one, as so much so, I was going to say as the world that I created, but so much so that God says, I'm going to take a back seat. I'm going to sit in the 7th row and I'm going to put you guys in first class. You guys are sitting in the first row. This Chodesh, Lachem, is yours. Rishon, it's the first. It's the head, literally the head, sitting in the row 1, at the head of the table. Who's sitting at the head of the table? Imagine the father stands up and puts his little kid, his 7th child, at the head of the table, and he sits. You know who the greatest teachers that I've ever had were? The ones I'm gonna reference Rabbi Besser today because he taught me something that I think started me in the teaching world. He stood at the blackboard. He took the chalk, walked over, handed it to me, sat in my seat, and said, "You give the lesson. You give the lesson." What does that do to a person? It transports them, it transforms them from student to teacher. That was really the beginning of when I started teaching. And the teachers who sit in the child's chair and allow the child to see the world from the perspective of the front of the class, it actually allows them to grow and mature into the role that they're in. My present self became my future self in 1 minute. What is God telling Bnei Israel? What is he telling all of us? You're not in the back of the class. You're at the front of the class now. Because this month, the one that you're going to designate, this moon that you're going to call the new moon, what was so grand about calling that moon a new moon. The day that you choose to say, this is Aleph Tishrei, you're going to count 10 days from there, and that's the day that you're going to fast on. But if you decide to call the next day or the previous day Aleph Tishrei, then Yom Kippur is really designated by who? By you. You decide when my holiday is going to be. You decide, you set the calendar, you say the 10th of Tishrei is Tuesday, God says, and I'll show up on Tuesday. But if you say that the 10th of Tishrei is Wednesday, I'm showing up on Wednesday, says God. Imagine, I'm feasting on a day that I would have been fasting, all depending on the witnesses who designate with the court the new moon. What is God saying? He's saying, I'm giving you the keys to time. You're controlling time. Do you understand the magnitude of what I'm charging you with? Time, especially, who are we speaking to? We're speaking to slaves where time is not their own. I don't even know how to comprehend this, and I'm not a slave. And God is saying, I am the master of time, and I'm handing you the keys, because with the responsibility that you're being charged, I want you to know that there are great, great privileges that come with that. This is how our exodus, our redemption, the trip to the promised land is going to begin with these words. Now it gets like 4,000. If you didn't think I was excited enough about this parshiah, just from a structural standpoint, I'm going to give you a few more examples. Before I do, I don't know which, like the clock is ticking and I don't know which to leave out. But since we're still in this verse, I just want to show you when it says, first of all, what's the name for the month is called Chodesh, Chadash. Something new is about to emerge. A month is called something new. And we know that every time we have Rosh Chodesh, it's cause for celebration because it allows for a renewal. But not just because it allows for a renewal because the moon is waxing and waning. That's not the only reason why. Because it's a chag, because it reminds us that God told us we're sitting in the front row. We have front row seats to our own destiny, to our own destination, to our own lives. That's what God is telling us here. And when it says the words lachem, it's in the plural, because I told you that this is a sefer that's going to speak to our national emergence. So lachem is written twice. But what if I told you to take that lachem and conjugate it into the singular? What would you get? Lecha. What does it remind you? Lecha. Lech lecha. This is our lech lecha. Abraham did his journey to the promised land. God told him lech lecha. And now that we're about to go to the promised land, it's going to say lachem. There is so much here that I'm feeling pressure. I'm nervous that I'm not giving it its proper attention, because every piece it's like fireworks. Could you notice every single nuance in the fireworks? By the time you notice one, another one came up, and you get so excited by the colors and the appearance of it that you can get lost in it. That's what Parashat HaChodesh is. Everywhere you look, there's bang, 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 more words. And then, of course, we have the word Rishon and Rosh. Why does it use that word, a head? A month doesn't have to have a head, a literal a head, a physical anthropomorphic head, but it uses that word head. What do you think of when you hear the Rosh? Maybe you think of Rosho Magia Hashamayim. Maybe you think of the ladder of Yaakov, how the head is reaching the heavens. This is us. This is the human being with our heads doing what? Bridging the gap between the earth and the heavens. This is the human being like a ladder, being a connector, reaching our greatest heights. That's what this Chodesh is. This is what God is giving us. He's offering us an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. Every Rosh Chodesh allows that. This Rosh Chodesh, specifically Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is the first one because it is the first time that we're able to see ourselves as something other than oppressed, limited, constricted slaves. And in every generation and in every time period, we may feel that we are confined. But what is the Torah saying? You're not confined. HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim. You have extra legroom. You're sitting in first class. You're the ones who are driving this whole journey. And as we move forward, and this is another beautiful thing, and I hope I have time to develop it, but I noticed a word that kept appearing, which is, of course, not a word that you would think I would, my favorite words. This particular word happens to appear 7 times in Parashat HaChodesh. Like, hey, yeah, good for you. You joined us. Thank you. So I don't know why, but these words pop out at me. And especially, thank you, especially when the word, it's called in Hebrew, there's a way to study. It's called milah mancha. It's a word that drives a thing. So sometimes there's one word that appears in a concentrated way in a parshiya, and it's as if the word is saying, look at me, look at me. But of course, it's not in bold or highlighted or underlined because the text doesn't allow that. So it just appears in a frequency. And when its frequency is 7 times, I can't help but say, something's going on here with this word. I hope you agree with me. I'm going to introduce you to the word. It's going to be a very unassuming word. It appears for the first time in verse 5. Setamim zachar ben shana. The animal should be perfect. It should be male. It should be a year old. No, I'm sorry. That's not where it first appears. It appears in verse 4. I should have started. Im yimat habayit. That verse, it says, b'michsat nefashot. Again, every one of these words, I once presented in Israel this parshiya in a totally different way than I'm presenting it to you, but I just want you to be even aware of that. Every single word in the parshiya is in and of itself a trip down memory lane. It tells us how we got here, and it tells us where we're going. And the words michsat nefashot, I told you, it's like fireworks for me, so I have to curb my enthusiasm because every time I see another explosion, I'm throwing myself off the journey. But I have to tell you, the words michsat nefashot, where's the first time we see that term? Vekisinu et nafsho. Vekisinu et damo. Somebody's blood gets covered up for us to start our journey to Egypt. When the brothers kill Yosef, they want to cover up his blood, so to speak. It's every word here is telling us, know how you got here, because those same footprints that you made in your trek here, you're going to end up retracing those steps to get back home. You go in a forest, you ever see those movies where they go in the forest and they lose their way? And the only way they could find their way home is maybe little string got caught in a tree, they see little markers. Well, footprints are a major marker. And what is Torah telling us here? Know how you got here. You got here with Yosef. You got here because his blood was covered up. You didn't want his father to know that you technically killed him. You didn't kill him, but so how are you going to get out of Egypt? You got in here by covering souls. You're going to get out of here by covering souls. The same way out know how you got in. But that wasn't why I brought you to this verse. I brought you to show you the first of 7 occurrences of the word, and it starts with ish lefi ochlo. The word that I'm referring to is ochel, eating. You'd say, why make a whole class about eating? What does that have to do anything with me? First of all, how are we going to get out of Egypt? God is telling Moshe. It depends on how we eat. First, yes, mish'arotam, that's how we leave. But before we do that, ish lefi ochlo. What's going to get us out of Egypt? Knowing, I'm going to say something, if you just joined, you're going to think I lost it, but I will support it in a minute. Ish lefi ochlo. Depending on how we consume, that's how we're going to be redeemed. What? Ish lefi ochlo? What does that even mean? So let's talk about it. You want to say how we ate the man? That's definitely something to look into. I challenge you to do a study on that. And I actually have it in my sefer, same as man, because the same words are used. Ish lefi ochlo. You're supposed to collect it, each man according to the quantity of what he eats. I don't want to talk about quantity of eating today.
What
I
you
want to
eat.
speak of quality of eating. How do we start our Seder? This is all about the Pesach experience, the redemption from Pesach, right? The Yetziat Mitzrayim. Rabbi Koskas on Saturday gave a great class in Florida. He said, why do we call it Yetziat Mitzrayim? We should call it Yetziat Bnei Israel. We're the ones who left. Yetziat Mitzrayim sounds like Mitzrayim is the one who left. So I'd like to suggest, he gave a beautiful story. I just got me thinking, and I'd like to suggest that you could take the Jew out of Egypt, but the challenge is Yetziat Mitzrayim, is taking Egypt out of the Jew, is taking the influence and taking the culture and taking all of the absorption that we have from Egypt, taking that Yetziat Mitzrayim. That was the great miracle. It wasn't taking us out physically. It was taking us out spiritually, emotionally, taking that Egypt out of us, right? We were filled with the land, and now we're taking that out. But then again, I digress yet again. So I'm going to take us back here. We start our Seder, which is the reenactment of Yetziat Mitzrayim. What's the first thing we say at our Seder? We say, Keha lahma anya. Keha lahma anya diachalu, right? You know this, right? So what does that mean? Keha lahma anya. This is the poor bread that we're eating. In our state of poverty, what are we saying? How do we eat? Ish lefi ochlo. What do we say? Kol dichvin yete veyechul. Anybody who is what? Poor, needy. Come join us. How do we eat? I know it sounds like such a basic, simple thing to say. And we, thank God, are living in a culture where we could be so generous and so open, and it's known about our tables that it's a bounty and we're always open and we're welcoming and happy to have guests. So kol dichvin yeteh veyechol means anybody who's hungry should come and join us. What's ish lefi ochlo? What's going to bring us to a national redemption? Knowing how to share what we have with others. And then we can go into the Yaakov story, where in order to give his brother a piece of bread and some soup, he took his birthright. We can go through all those stories down memory lane. I'm not taking you there today because there isn't time, but I do want to take you to a particular place. My granddaughter is in the house, little Vivien Hidary. I want to tell you that this word ochel, this word for eating, is beckoning and begging us to go somewhere. It's talking about, I'll take a step back for a minute. The parasha is talking about bringing a sheep, slaughtering it, and eating it together at the table, right? And why would it use the word eating 7 times in this story? If not, perhaps to remind us of the first eating that we did. And now you'll know where I'm going with that. When's the first time that eating ever appears in Torah? Yes, in Bereshit, exactly, in Bereshit. So let's talk about that for a minute as well. Exactly. We were supposed to take the world and we were supposed to take care of it. God planted everything and it was our job to take care of it. And in that story, and here's where you're gonna get like super duper exciting. You ready? We have, turn to chapter 3 in Bereshit, please. What we're doing, just so we take a step back for a minute. What are we doing at our Pesach Seder? I told you we're taking the top, the number 7, I'm saying this, the bottom, the number 7, and putting it to the top. And we're taking the number 1 and putting it to the bottom. The first month is becoming the 7th, the 7th is becoming the 1. And in doing so, what has to happen? How did we fall from our perch? What happened that we ended up leaving Egypt? I'm sorry. What happened that we ended up leaving Eden? Well, you're gonna see right now in the story. I don't know about you, but these things are just too perfect for me. In the story in Gan Eden about eating from the fruit, if somebody has the guts to count how many times eating is used in that story, you'll be blown away. You'll be blown away. There are no coincidences to the perfection that is Torah. So I'll show it to you. So the Nachash, that snake, comes and says what? He comes to speak to the Isha, I'm in verse 1, and he says, "Ha'af ki amar Elohim lo tochlu." That's our first one. Don't eat from all the fruits. And what does the Isha say? No, mi pri etz hagan nochal. That's our second one. Yes, we can. We could eat from the fruits. And then she says, but only from the tree in the center of the garden. Elohim said, lo tochlu. That's our third one. You can't eat. And our fourth one, the Nachash responds to the Isha and says, Elohim knows that on the day achalchem mimenu, that you eat from it, that your eyes will be open and you'll be like gods yourselves. And then our fifth one is the Isha sees that the fruit, that the tree is tov ha'etz lema'achal, that's our fifth. Vatikach mepiryo vatochal, that's our sixth. She gives it also to her husband, vayochal. In the story of the transgression of eating from the tree, we have the verb eating 7 times. In our story today, we have our verb eating 7 times. What is the Torah telling us? You want to go back to an ideal? Then you have to rectify this thing, which is describing how we eat. We would think it's so physical, so basic of an activity, which is called eating, but no, says the Torah. What took place with that first eating? With that first eating, we diminished who we were created to be. What does that mean? We didn't recognize that we were great. We didn't recognize that we were creators. We didn't recognize that we could bring life into being also. We had all of those gifts already. God created us with all of those gifts. And what did we do? We thought that we needed an external source. We thought we needed a fruit to give us what we already had. We didn't, in short, we didn't recognize our greatness. And that was our downfall. And now, what is God telling us in Parashat HaChodesh? I'm going to tell you eating 7 times at the same chapter where I'm telling you to recognize your greatness, to recognize your potential, to recognize that you're sitting in the front row. Don't see yourselves as anything less than the greatness that I created you to be. How do you do that? Ish lefi ochlo. How do you eat? Moving forward as a nation, yes. You have to recognize not just your greatness. What does it mean to feed the poor? Yes, it's generous, but it means to be able to see outside yourself. That's how Yosef got out of jail. He saw that the butler and the baker was zo'afim. He saw that even though in his own distress, he saw the distress of others. These are the building blocks of who we're going to become as a nation and how we're going to get there. When Yosef sees himself not just as the victim who was thrown in a jail with unsubstantiated and false charges, as long as he saw himself as that, what was he? A victim in a jail with false charges. The minute he saw himself as something other than that, as somebody who could help somebody else, what happened to him? His whole, when you change the way you see things, the things you see change. He changed his perspective. You're slaves right now on page 348 in chapter 12 in Shemot. You can't see yourselves for who you are. It's impossible. You have kotze ruach. You could barely breathe. Kotze ruach. You're mitzar yam. You're constricted. You literally don't have wind in your lungs. You can't hear because you can't breathe. What does that mean? They couldn't listen to Moshe because they didn't have breath. What does that mean? It means that when one of your senses is compromised, all of your senses are compromised. And so God is telling us here in this week's parasha, recognize, know who you are. Know that I already created you as individuals in Bereshit. I already created a world in Bereshit. But now I'm creating a new dynamic. And the new dynamic is a world that you're going to create. And in that world, you're going to create yourselves. You're going to recreate yourselves. And in doing so, you must make sure that how you see yourselves is as a reflection of me. You must see me in seeing yourselves. I say this all the time. Wherever we are, it's not just us. We're not just walking in with ourselves. We're walking in with the reflection of ourselves, our tselem Elokim, our godliness. We're walking in with that. What can't we do? I can't ask what can we do because the answer is the infinite. What can't we do is nothing. There's nothing we can't do if we take the lesson from the first achilah. When we sit at our seder and we're eating that food, what are we saying? This is our kapara for the first improper eating. I ate improperly, and in order to rectify the world, what do I have to do? I now have to eat properly. And that's what the Torah is saying. Don't take this as just you're mixing the matzah, the charoset, that you're making a sandwich and you're calling it a day. And no, this is a symbolic act that speaks to us recognizing what we can be and what we must be in order to get to the next phase. And how do we do that? Don't forget, b'ne'arenu u'b'ziknenu. We bring our young idealistic selves. We bring our energetic selves. We bring the awe that we had. What does awe mean? Awe means accepting something that defies reality. I'm in awe of something. What does that mean? It's not normal, because if it was something normal, then it wouldn't be awesome. So it means it's something that defies my world. In German, the word for wonder, Wunde, from the word wound, it's painful. When I see something that doesn't fit in with my knowledge of the world, then it's hard for me to process it and to incorporate it and to integrate it with all my previous notions and knowledges. That's what wonder is. I'm in a state of wonder, means I'm wondering how this fits in with everything that I already have. That's awe. That's what the Chagim are. That's what Chag LaHashem is. Chag LaHashem means being willing to bring our ne'arenu in our youthful stage. What do? We accept it. We may not understand it. I don't know how things work, but what do? I embrace it. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. I believe in it, even though I don't understand it. The older we get, the more skeptical we get, the more analytical we get, the more sense things have to make to us. But when we're younger, we accept what is and we enjoy it for whatever it is. That's what's being asked of us here. This is the parasha of plagues. And what is God saying to us here? I want you to see the greatness, my wonders, otot, moftim. I want you to see my wonders without wondering. Enjoy it, accept it, appreciate it, and believe that it is part and parcel of the way the world operates. Just like we turn the world top to bottom, I'm giving you a chance to see now the world from my perspective, says God. I'm going to allow you, because from up there, down there, anything is possible. It's very hard when you're on the bottom. I just flew home yesterday. So when you're on an airplane, you see things completely differently than you see them when you're on the ground. It's two totally different vistas. What is God saying? HaChodesh hazeh lachem. I invite you. I give you an opportunity to take the month that I created the world, put it on the bottom. And the month that you're now going to create your future, put that on the top. And from that top perch, I want you to see. And when you look at the world from my perspective, everything's possible. Miracles, nisim, niflaot, all that is totally part of the fabric of the way God created his world. I believe that that's what Parashat Bo is speaking to. I also believe it's a way for us to go back to an ideal, to go back to Gan Eden, to fix the things that went wrong, and to move forward with them. God allows us to not wallow in our mistakes, in our regrets. Don't wallow in those regrets. What stops us from moving forward? The regrets of the past. Go back. Fix whatever you have to fix, even if you're just fixing your perception of them, even if you're just making your peace with them, whatever it is that's holding you back, go back for a minute and then go to the bet, but make sure you end up where? In the front row, back to the Aleph. Go back, move forward as a nation, as individuals, and God willing with that, may we all reach our personal promised lands, our national promised lands, and we should do it in peace, in health, and in prosperity. Thank you for joining us today.